Welcome to the next episode of Hometown History's Greatest Inventions. Hello, once again. We're back with another episode of Hometown History's Greatest Inventions. This time, we are concentrating on the state of Alabama. What did you say? What? I didn't quite hear you. Maybe you're starting to guess what the greatest invention is. It is indeed the hearing aid. Hearing aid hasn't always been what we know today, which is just a tiny thing in your ear. It's digital and all that stuff. Its beginnings were quite a lot more interesting. So let's go into that. So the first hearing aids were these enormous horn-shaped trumpets. They sort of had that large open piece at the end that you're seeing here that collected the sound, and it gradually tapered into a thin tube that funneled into the ear. They also had ones that were just literally an ear trumpet. You sort of think of something that you'd be like, a Viking battle comes up and it could serve a dual purpose, but that's just sort of how they had it. It was pretty simplistic in nature. The development of the modern hearing aid might not have been possible if it hadn't been for contributions from two of the greatest inventors of the late 19th and 20th centuries. But this original hearing aid, it served its purpose, and you always see the jokes. You see the old man like, ah! But this is what it was, and this is what it'll go to. So a couple of these inventions that happened in this period of time had to do with the phone and like the phonograph, auditory type devices that then made it possible. It was just a matter of taking those devices that were invented and sort of downsizing them to make this work in an electric fashion for the hearing aid that we would start to see come around the turn of the century. And that's just sort of how it all came into being. It's sometimes some of these inventions, the neat thing about it is you see something that somebody else has for like a completely different purpose and then say, if I did this, this, and this, combine these things, made them smaller, we might actually have something that could work. So the first of our two inventors that were important to what would eventually become the hearing aid is Alexander Graham Bell. He electronically amplified sound in his telephone using a carbon microphone and battery. It was a concept that was adopted by the hearing aid manufacturers soon after. The other of our two inventors is Thomas Edison. In 1886, he invented the carbon transmitter, which changed sounds into electrical signals that could travel through wires and be converted back into sounds. This technology was also used shortly thereafter in those first hearing aids. So needless to say, without these two particular inventions and how they would be implemented into the creation and invention of the hearing aid, it wouldn't have been possible, not in that form, right around the Industrial Revolution. I'm sure it would have happened at some point, but those two inventions in particular were the most important. Now, one thing to say, these first electric hearing aids were really quite cumbersome. I believe the battery packs were like 40 pounds or something like that. I had to look at that, but these were not small things, and they ran around $400. So they also were not cheap. Like with any technology, is sort of when it first comes out until it gets improved. whatever's involved with it, the different technological pieces, until they can sort of make them cheaper and make them more in mass. It's going to be an expensive process, but needless to say, this was a huge jump forward. And now, in Alabama's case, there's one individual that is most responsible for the hearing aid. We'll talk about him now. So the Industrial Revolution allowed for mass production of hearing aids eventually, and it created a new middle class that could afford the technology. In 1800, several companies, including George P. Piling and Sons of Philadelphia and Kirchner and Wilhelm of Stuttgart, Germany, produced their own versions of hearing aids. In 1898, the Dictograph Company introduced the first commercial carbon-type hearing aid involving these parts. Now, where it comes into this particular video is Miller Reese Hutchinson of the Accuphone Company in Alabama. He patented the first practical electrical hearing aid, which used carbon transmitter and battery, but it was so large that it had to sit on a table, and it sold for $400. Now, in the 1920s, vacuum tubes were introduced to hearing aids, which made sound amplification more efficient, but the enormous batteries still made them cumbersome. In 1952, it ushered the age of the transistor hearing aids. The addition of these simple on-off switches finally enabled the advent of smaller hearing aid. The early transistor hearing aids were designed to fit within the frames of eyeglasses. Later, they were adapted to fit behind the ear. And the first transistor hearing aid to hit the market in late 1952 was sold by Sonophone for $229.50. And then, as we know, things went digital in the 90s and went from there. But these really wouldn't have happened without this gentleman. And this is, my guess is their greatest invention. There are quite a few other ones that we'll go into here in a second. But the hearing aid has definitely improved people's lives and is an extraordinary invention. So let's talk about a couple more of the inventions in Alabama that get an honorable mention. Honorable mention. So our first honorable mention is the windshield wiper. Mary Anderson, who is a Greene County native, invented the windshield wipers in 1903 after a visit to New York City. She was riding in a trolley car on a snowy night. The driver had to stop every few minutes to wipe away the slush from the window. When she returned home to Birmingham, she got a patent and tried selling her idea. However, it was rejected. Not surprisingly, when the patent expired, that's when the auto industry began using her designs. So this is another one of those inventions that it was a brilliance, a moment of brilliance where she saw a need and invented it. And thankfully, we have these. It's amazing that people, even at that early stage of the auto industry, it's amazing that nobody thought of something like that. So our next invention for Alabama would be vinyl. Demopolis's native Waldo Simon, a chemist, invented the material that's used to make vinyl, polyvinyl chloride, or PVC. A few things this vinyl material is used for includes pipes, shower curtains, automotive parts, and phonograph records, which right there we got to be thankful for because it's one of the greatest inventions ever. So in the last of the three honorable mentions is one that kids forevermore will be thankful for. I remember when these came out, the Super Soaker water gun. It's one of the world's best-selling toys and was invented by Mobile native Lonnie Johnson, and it was released in 1989. You can't have summer fun without the Super Soaker. And it was actually its cool own invention that you could do a whole thing on. I think History Channel's done the toys that made us, and that was something that they concentrated on. It's sort of cool because it sort of happened, I think, by accident. But the guy was brilliant, like absolutely brilliant, but just tons and tons of fun for kids. And this is another great invention from the state of Alabama. So I want to say thanks for coming along on another adventure here in our Hometown History's Greatest Inventions. This was a lot of fun. It's just seeing where different things come from, how they were invented, who was involved, and just learning new things. It's a unique, cool little series. I'm glad we started it, and I think the next state is Arizona. So we're going to try to go alphabetical. Alabama should have been first, but I just sort of did Alaska because ranch dressing always joke about. I think it's Jim Gaffigan that says about it's made of mayonnaise and sadness or something along those lines. But anyways, it was a lot of fun as always. Thanks for coming along, and we will see you all about town.